Scream 7, here we go. You guys know, and if you don't, you should, and so many people have been asking for this to the point that they were mad that a different video came out like the day after this movie even released, that I've got a massive, I talk about Scream a lot. I did a pretty big video covering the first 5 movies because of how much I disliked Scream 5. I did a separate one when 6 came out, and I guess my expectations were so low that one just didn't hurt as much. I've been vocally critical of many of the choices in the last couple movies, like serial killer genetics while you hallucinate your serial killer father. What is this, Riverdale? But there were elements I enjoyed and nuggets of things that I felt were interesting that I thought if somebody just really got their hands on it well, maybe they could do something great with it. So I was at least interested to see what they would do for the 3rd installment. We didn't get to see that though, because Skydance, a company that I already had issues with, owned by Paramount, a company I have major issues with, I'm really not looking forward to what they're about to do with Warner, fired Melissa Barrera, the new lead of that franchise, for speaking out against what was happening in Gaza. She has kept up with the horror game though since then. If you haven't caught Abigail, I have a video on this channel, and I really enjoyed the horror comedy Your Monster that she was in. Almost immediately after that firing, Jenna Ortega backed out of the project, and she's now stated that it's because she felt it was all falling apart and not something she wanted to pursue without the original team. At some point, the director they brought on, Chris Landon, who I was really excited to see take a stab at the Scream franchise, also backed out, leading to an entire overhaul. Meaning the company that refused to pay Neve Campbell what she was worth to be in Scream 6 had to pay her a buttload of money to come back for this one. Then shell out a bunch more to have a script rewritten, bring in a new director who is the original writer of the series, who unfortunately I don't think he's the best director, probably because they all knew they had leverage over the situation to ask for a bunch of money. Now, because of all that, I knew a lot of people weren't going to want to see this movie. I wasn't even going to go see it, but I did end up getting the ability to go see it for free, so I figured I would see it so I can relay it to you. Because unless this has such a steep fall off in week 2, this is the highest grossing Scream movie. They have progressively been making more money over the years, which makes sense. But this thing is going to make bank, which is disappointing for a couple reasons, because we don't like rewarding things, but it's also not good. And I can say that with full honesty. I've taken a lot of heat for different Scream takes. I maintain that Scream 4 is amazing, and I can explain at length to why, and the fact that it is more relevant today than this movie ends up being. But with all the other factors removed, if it just turned out that after 6, they were like, cool, you had the 2 contract thing, we don't want to do a 3rd, we want to take a different direction, this is not a good movie. And I'll explain to you why I think so. It just ends up being this mess of themes and ideas trying to engage with its own history, but failing miserably, in my opinion, and also like just kind of maybe taking pot shots at the last movie in certain ways once it gets to the end, and it's like, you did that though. You did that? It's one of the only Screams where I didn't feel any weight from Ghostface. There was really no tension. I never really felt myself on edge. The kills are pretty lame. Like, some of them are, you know, creative and a little brutal, but the way they fit into the movie isn't that impressive because the buildup feels like it's missing. It's shot pretty poorly outside a couple visuals that land. It becomes very obvious that some actors were only contracted to be there for a couple days at a time, so they just disappear. And if it was just that it was bad, I probably wouldn't be bothering this video. If it had flopped, I'd probably just move on to something else, but it's everything around this movie and its release that makes it such a clown show to me that I really feel like I just needed to vent it out somewhere. Because everything outside this movie with the marketing has been a total joke. The promo, the fact that you can AI generate yourself into a ghost face killing, bet on characters with airtight plot armor dying, it's wild. But hey, the casual injuries that all these plot armored characters get probably makes them wish they had access to today's sponsor, ZocDoc, the free website where you can search and compare high quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment with the one that matches your needs. From primary care to dentistry, eye care, skincare, and almost everything in between. ZocDoc makes it easy to book in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers. They let you sort by insurance, location, specialties, and see reviews by verified patients, making it easy to find the best care for you. And they also get you those appointments fast, typically in just 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even score same-day appointments sometimes. There's no need to call the doctor's office, wait on hold, try to figure out what their hours are. ZocDoc lets you do it all online. I talked about how they saved me in a tough spot when I was running out of an essential medication before I had to travel, but I also recently used them to rebook a dental checkup, so always coming in handy. So stop putting off your health and go to ZocDoc.com/AmandaTheJedi or click the link down below to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. Thanks again to ZocDoc for sponsoring. Let's get back to the video. it became so much more interesting when I realized that all the stuff they were doing to market it would have been perfect inside a Scream movie to like make some kind of in-universe commentary with the Stab franchise. Like they even partnered with a gambling site that will also let you bet on the odds of countries being bombed. Even I turned them down when they hit my inbox. I think I said in one of the 2 Scream videos, probably this one on 6, that they have essentially become the Stab movies, but this one really just takes that to undeniable levels. There was a 10-minute build-up preview to the screening that included a music video by Ice Nine Kills and McKenna Grace. I literally just sat there looking at my friend with my jaw hanging open in disbelief at how much they had lost the damn plot. And they're being rewarded for it, but at least they had to pay out the ass for it too. Outside that though, the movie has like a handful of different themes that it like either lightly touches on and tries to engage with, but I don't think it's exploring any of them particularly well. To the point that, as I mentioned, Scream 4 is still more culturally relevant, and it came out 15 years ago. And if you didn't want it to be a culturally relevant statement or anything, it also didn't do any classic like poking fun at horror tropes. It just kind of became all the things it used to poke fun at, and then I don't even think it's doing a good job reckoning with itself. As many issues as I have with Scream 5, I think that one still did it better. I think a lot of the choices come from trying to appease multiple sides of a fan base at the same time without knowing which side you want to land on, and then the way they go, in my opinion, is dumb, but it could have been more dumb, I found out. I started giving them some benefit of the doubt with some choices after a while, and then I read some interviews and was like, never mind, you're all stupid. I know Kevin came back to write and direct, but it is a co-writing experience with Guy Busick, who wrote Scream 5 and Scream 6, so I feel like a lot of the issues I have with this fall on him, but he also wrote things like Ready or Not that I'm a really big fan of. There are some moments that are entertaining. I will say this is probably the best the twins have been in any of the movies, so it's kind of unfortunate that they're not in it that much. But there's really nothing surprising in this, nothing tense. It feels so bland, and much like Mercy, it just doesn't seem to have any interest in doing anything with the things it's been setting up. So I never really had much faith in this installment because I really feel like they've consistently been missing cool opportunities in the last 2 outings that we've had. So even before the shift, I would have been kind of like, let's hope they can pull something really good off here. But then with this, like the rewrites were so rushed, the filming was rushed. I feel like it was just like the most expensive and least interesting direction they could have taken the franchise. Well, almost. There is something that could have made it worse, and I found out they almost did it, but we will get to that. So just to give you a little bit of a spoiler-free premise, this movie is kind of like going with the idea that Sidney had like a 2-year-old toddler during Scream 4 that she just never mentioned, presumably for that child's safety. Even though a major part of that story was, even though she says she's coming out the other side of the darkness, she's still kind of very isolated and not trusting. So, you know, some people are really nitpicking in on that one. I was going to be one of them originally, but, you know, of all the other things that are wrong with this, it's whatever. She's got the husband. The other kids are here. She has 3 kids, actually. Not that the younger ones really matter in this story because they're just with the grandparents the entire movie. I think it's because they mentioned toddlers in one of the installments. So they're like, well, shit, she's got to have younger kids too. But the one that matters is Tatum, named after Sidney's friend that died in Scream 1, of course, trying to find her place in the world and live up to whatever legacy her mom seems to have. But Sidney's really kept her closed off from it all, which feels so counter Sidney. I understand not wanting to put your trauma on your child, but I genuinely believe that kid would have been at a gun range the second they had like finger strength to pull a trigger. I can see her being overprotective, but sheltering her from being able to defend herself is probably not the direction I could ever see her going, considering people are always trying to kill Sidney. Obviously, a new Ghostface killer shows up that does seem to have Sidney and her family in the crosshair specifically, and that's all I can really say without venturing into some things that are considered spoilers. I feel like this movie is really trying to retread a lot of elements of the original movies to the point that some lines are even just like ripped right out, and there's so many of like the identical needle drops at the exact same moments. Even some of the characters start feeling like they're stand-ins for ones from the past, but we don't really get enough time with any of them to care. Like you've got the weird horror, true crime obsessed neighbor kid that literally looks and acts like a combination of Robbie and Charlie from Scream 4. Then her boyfriend is ripping Billy Loomis lines, but acts like Derek from Scream 2, even though he's not older than the Tatum actress. He feels a lot older in this role. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I also just don't feel any chemistry between them. He is giving nothing, and she is giving Netflix young adult story. I'm sure a lot of that comes down to the writing. I am not familiar with them outside this to judge. And I don't mind retreads as long as you're using them in a fun way or to subvert expectations or flip things, but that is just not happening here. Let's dive into the movie, which means spoilers. You have been warned. We are going to be getting into spoiler territory. As always, we have to begin with our cold open, starring Jimmy Tatro, who I do love, and it's at the Macher house, which has now been turned into an Airbnb, which just feels so incredibly accurate to today's society. You'd get a combo of the stab and the true crime fans. So that's setting up something that could potentially be interesting. You've got, body outlines on the ground, the photo op locations in the house. You've got the Airbnb host calling and doing like their little quizzes. But this mostly all exists just to re-up the theory that Stu Macher is still alive. Yeah, he just survived multiple stab wounds and his head being crushed by a CRT TV and electrocuted. Even without the electrocution, maybe some of you don't remember or don't know, but those things were heavy as shit. I'm pretty sure that one was like a Sony Trinitron that could have been up to 90 pounds. Let's be real here, people. I understand it's a horror movie and anything they want to happen can theoretically happen, and the bounds of cinema don't always matter here, and you could even use that in a way to make a meta commentary on something else in a very fun way. The Stuthers don't feel like that's what they want. It's all faith for them. It's faith that this guy is still alive. Because honestly, based on the way this franchise has been going, it wouldn't have surprised me. They brought Billy Loomis back as a hallucination. Why not Stu for real? And there's even going to be things in this movie that have people being like, see, he is still alive. We'll get to those too. Regardless of who's going to be doing the killings, though, a real killer does show up to the house. The first real jump scare in this movie comes from a motion-activated ghost face that, of course, the real ghost face replaces at some point. So even after Jimmy's here, wait, it's moving different than it used to. He just still stays close enough to get stabbed up. That funnels into a kind of fun chandelier moment with the girl before Ghostface comes out on top and burns the place down. Jumping us over to Pine Grove, Indiana, where Sidney Prescott settled down with her husband Mark, the local sheriff here. And in a lot of ways, Sid does seem like she's chilled out. Obviously she's still overcautious and still has to wonder if people looking at her weird are targeted or just regular weirdos. She owns a local coffee shop. Her neighbor's Anna Camp, whose son is obsessed with true crime, meaning he definitely sees Sid as some kind of celebrity. And that's probably the more accurate thing they start to engage with in this movie and then mostly don't really bother with, the obsession with true crime. It should probably be a girl, though. They do make up the vast majority of people that engage with that content. But hey, maybe this guy wanting to start a true crime podcast is better than him starting a hustle how to be a man culture one. So we're just weighing evils here. The point is that even though these killings have never really stopped and they've just kind of switched focus, people do treat it all like a piece of media to be engaged with. Even Anna Camp said she was watching that Dateline episode about the New York killings with her son, just knows well enough to tell the kid not to talk about it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. After the cold open, it actually starts with Tatum's boyfriend crawling through her window to the same music that was playing when Billy crawled into Sid's room, delivering the same line.
Well, it occurred to me that I've never snuck through your bedroom window.
I get homage and I get turning the eye on yourself and your own legacy and tend to enjoy when they do stuff like that, but it is not being done well here. He even goes on with insert scary movie name here was on, got me thinking of you. Except here, instead of The Exorcist, it was Stab 1. You know, the movie about two guys who tried to kill her mom after killing her grandmother? The franchise based on your mother's continued years of torment and attempted murders? Losing friends and loved ones constantly? Wild foreplay, but it works. I get that in some ways they're probably saying hey, wasn't the shit Billy saying in the first movie pretty wild? How did no one know he was the killer? But a lot of what Billy was saying was coming across as typical teen tactics to get sex, and Billy was under scrutiny the entire movie. It took him the entire movie to get Sid to be okay, maybe you're not the killer, but literally, even after they hook up, she still asks him a question wondering if he could be the killer. It never drops down. It's not like this movie where this guy will do something very sketchy down the road and then she's just oh yeah, I know you're fine. These might seem like nitpicks, but it just really seems to be setting the foundation that they don't know how to do the things they're trying to convey. They can't get too steamy though, because Sidney obviously pays attention to what's going on in the house and is not going to let a teen boy climb into her daughter's window. Personal history aside, most parents aren't going to let that happen. But it's laying a little bit of the foundation for the hostility that exists between Sidney and Tatum. Something else that's pretty typical. Teen girls and their moms, they have problems sometimes. But she goes on to call Sid a hypocrite because everyone knows she let her boyfriend crawl through her window. Which again, had Mr. Prescott known that Billy was in her room, he also would have been kicked out. It's a teen's job to try to bend the rules and a parent's job to try to maintain them regardless of what they did as teenagers. Get your game up. Again, this is just part of ongoing tension despite everything we know about Sidney Prescott. I guess she's been pretty hesitant to go over her history with Tatum, literally saying, hey, there are countless movies, news stories, documentaries all about it, so you can find out anything you want, which is obviously different than your mom having a genuine conversation with you about any of it. So she's just kind of been sheltered from it all. And I get the logic of wanting to protect your children from the things that happen to you and not wanting to put that kind of trauma on them and trying to hide from that own trauma within yourself. But like, people try to kill Sidney on a semi-regular basis. I feel like your kids should have the rundown. There'd be multiple escape plans in place with this kid. What to do if a fake ghost face starts calling you and tormenting you on the phone. Like, you cannot have it both ways, that Sid is always prepared and never fully trusting, but also trying to completely shield her child from it. But let's continue on. Outside, the neighbor Jessica, who has apparently escaped an abusive husband with her kid, who is the obvious red herring killer as a true crime junkie. He's dating one of Tatum's friends, Chloe, and then the friend group is rounded out by McKenna Grace, as mentioned, who is kind of having a rough go with the horror roles lately, but hey, she got a music video out of this one. Girl, no, you're a star, not like this. She is the star of the school musical, though, the one that Tatum's apparently really nervous about when she's in a dog suit the entire time, which is where they introduce us to another potential killer. The drama teacher is very weird. It's kind of funny because he's like calling out Tatum on her lack of like fire when she's in a dog costume, but she's like, your mother, she's Sidney Prescott, she has so much fire, and I was really expecting more from you. Which I think saying that to a student whose parent has survived multiple murder attempts could be a fireable offense. I feel like that's like Sidney Prescott's kid ends up in your class and you probably get a little note at the beginning of the year that says like, don't mention this. It does act as another layer for Tatum to feel like she's weak and timid instead of this like force of nature that everyone describes her mom as. Like, she's literally taking the worst charitability of her own name, thinking like, my mom named me after a victim. That's a little face she has in me. And I get what they're going for, but it's really uninteresting to me. It would make sense for Sidney to be super overbearing and have her over prepared, that Tatum would then rebel against that, not thinking that anything serious would come to their door, versus not being prepared for it at all. Especially once the killings picked back up with Sam and it was all still technically connected to the original events. They're clearly trying to set Tatum up as some kind of continuation in the series. I just don't really care for how they went about it. I don't like this character at all. I don't like the direction they chose to take her, especially when one of the main points of this movie and the stuff that happened outside it is that Sidney is still a major selling point. She is a major draw. You had to pay her millions to bring her back. And even if their intention is to try to build up this side character, the focus is still so much on Sidney, especially when Ghostface is immediately taunting Sidney with Stu Macher himself. She's still getting what she assumes are fake Ghostface calls, but this time it is someone who is deep faking, presumably, Stu Macher's face. Coming to finish things off 30 years after the original killings. I immediately assumed this was a deep fake, or I really hoped it was, but I also didn't have any idea what to expect. I didn't have any faith in the decisions they might make when you know they were going to be making a lot of these decisions based on like audience reactions. And there are a lot of stoothers out there. But whoever the killer is not wasting any time, because he is already at Tatum's school, escalating things very fast, wasting no time, slinks past Tatum because obviously we have to work on the build-up to kill her, going right to kill McKenna Grace in one of the stage texts first. Leading to what is probably the most creative kill of the movie. She's up on like this fly pulley system, giving Ghostface the perfect angle to literally gut her like a pig. They get one piece of very striking imagery where the floodlight silhouette of like her intestines, it's pretty brutal, and it's like the only time I was like, okay, that's an interesting shot. I will give them that. So even though Sidney's the one getting the main taunting, because it did happen around Tatum and whoever did this seemed to have like knowledge of the layout of the stage and everything, they're obviously honing in on her friends and the people who should have been there but might have left. So like Tatum's boyfriend wasn't with her in that moment, so it could have been him. Chloe said she was in the same room that Tatum was, but Tatum didn't see her. Lucas had gone home. The creepy teacher says he was at home. Sidney obviously goes right to blaming boyfriend Ben, which is fair, even though it was only the boyfriend 2 times in this entire franchise, and one of those times it wasn't even her boyfriend. I get it though, Sid. I don't much like his vibes either. I guess he's super good with computers, so that could make him very good with deepfakes, and you'd have to be very good to make it convincing in conversation and not just as pre-recorded videos. Even though her friend just died, Tatum again just feels more upset that she wasn't prepared to do anything, because maybe she could have helped, but like, girl, you didn't hear shit. You walked in after it had already all happened. Like, what were you gonna do? Doesn't take long for another attack though. They're not gonna stay at the house until the killer's caught, so they go to get some grab bags, but the killer's already in the damn attic. Rookie mistake from the cops not including that in their search, but also I would say that's rookie mistake on Mark for not thinking about that, considering they had a conversation that morning that it is a usable attic because Tatum was up there digging out clothes like Sidney's Scream 2 leather jacket. This is probably one of the only moments in the movie that had some kind of tension, like they used the house as a set piece decently well. But when I say they have sheltered Tatum from being prepared, it is to levels that don't make sense. Because once Mark gets Tatum away from Ghostface, she and Sidney run to a panic room that she didn't know existed. Guys, come on, this is foolish. She'd at least know about the panic room. The person who has regularly had someone trying to kill them who felt the need to make a panic room would tell the child about the panic room. Satisfying baseball bat to the head here for Ghostface, though, not that it does too much, as I've maintained. The mask boosts some natural stats of anybody who's wearing it. It's why Amber was able to hold Dewey up. This will not keep whoever's under there down for long. Now, because Sid wants to go help Mark, who got knocked out, because she assumes that if Ghostface can't get to them, he'll circle back around. They do start making their way out, which involves like this narrow passage through a wall, which is unfortunately very stabbable. They do make it out fine, other than Sidney getting a little sliced, but nothing new there. Knock the killer into the streets where he can be run over by Gale Weathers and her new crew comprised of Chad and Mindy. I will say it feels like they made a dig at Melissa Barrera here, because at one point someone's like, you've been canceled twice, Gale, and she was like, no, I had contracts and they both ran out. Honestly, I think they brought these guys in for like 2 days max and they probably still got their full original salary for it, but who knows? I feel like Courtney Cox was probably only here for like 4 days. But I guess Gale turned up after she heard about the Macher house burning down and realized Sid would probably be the next target. So she's both showing up to help and get the story. So when they pull the mask off this guy, it's the random guy that looked at Sidney weird at the coffee shop. Apparently some guy who escaped from a psychiatric facility 2 weeks earlier where he was in for a triple murder. No clear motive, so Sidney's not satisfied that he was acting alone. Panning over all the people waiting on the other side of the police tape, where of course Tatum's boyfriend is there and the weird teacher. Once we got to the end of the movie and I was thinking about it, there were so many ways that he could have been a good Ghostface and they could have used him in a really interesting way, and he could have really fit into what they do end up going with, but I'm just gonna let you know, it's not him. We won't see him again. Obviously, a lot of people think it's Lucas, the neighbor boy who's obsessed with true crime, but, you know, he believes that AI is the death of civilization.
AI? I refuse. That is the death of civilization.
The comment is definitely played to make him more the butt of a joke, so I really had no hope with them doing anything remotely interesting with deepfakes at this point. And to prove Sidney right that there is another killer, they get another call from deepfake, or at least who we assume is deepfake Stu, really trying to maintain that it's him. He's all like, I always had a thing for you, Sid. It's in one of he says it, which theoretically only she would know that was ever said to her by Stu, though there is a chance that all the stuff Gale was recording was still running and she sold that shit off. But just the fact that this person is so readily taunting her and basically saying like, I am coming for you and your family, it's enough for her to get on board with Gale to try to figure out who it could be. So they head to that psychiatric facility and start talking to one of the employees that definitely shouldn't be showing or talking to them about anything involving this man. So then they show him a picture of FaceTime Stu and he's like, oh yeah, that's John. He had amnesia from blow to the head. He got let out a couple weeks ago. You know, the same time the other guy broke out. Conveniently, they were really good friends. So they really want to leave the option open that Stu could be alive, but I just genuinely assumed that because this guy worked here and was familiar with the escaped guy, he might be the other killer that helped that guy escape. You know, it's kind of not the easiest thing to escape from a psychiatric facility when you're there for violent crimes. Because at this point, I still had faith that Kevin Williamson would not pull a Palpatine. Or at least that if they were going to do something like that, they'd do it in a way that was good and making a commentary on that and not just being like, well, what do the fans want? The second you start worrying about that too much, you've already lost. They're really trying to convince us though, because they even mentioned that Woodsboro doesn't have Stu's body intake form, so someone either took it or it never existed. Again, don't you think his parents would have said something if a body didn't turn up? Do you think they might be a little bit miffed, even if their son was a little killer? That the body was gone? But we don't even really get to dig into any of that mystery or really go down that track because we gotta start juggling in the younger crowd because they gotta try to make us care about her. So will Gale and Sidney decide to do an on-air interview, which they think is the best way to lure this guy out, but it's mostly, I think it's just because it's the thing Gale's wanted for 30 years, so they just wanted to put it there. But that really doesn't make any sense because this killer already has a plan in his head. He knows what he's doing. He knows what his aims are. You're not going to bait him into calling so that you can run a trace on the phone. But whatever, while they're doing that, Tatum's trying to build her own plan to find the killer with Chad and Mindy, who say the best way to figure out who it is to get all the suspects in the same room, as if that has ever worked for them. How many times do you want your brother to get stabbed, Mindy? Because you really have two options. You either do have the killer in there who then just has to like wait it out and not do anything and then like nothing becomes of it, or you've now just put most of the viable victims in the same spot to just be picked off one by one when the killer killer does show up. But they all decide to bunker down at Chloe's parents' restaurant, and we get the classic Mindy motive breakdown that this time it's not a Stab fan, it's a Sidney fan, and that's why it's personal. That's why it's bringing back Stu. A Scream Queen cannot be allowed to rest. And obviously the killer does show up at the restaurant after they stab the shit out of Mark back at the house. Mark was acting like an absolute idiot in that scene. But the killer shows up right when Tatum was getting bent to drive her to the station because they saw the interview and it went pretty poorly. Gail was really grilling Sid on completely fading out of the spotlight, which is a fair thing to do. She's like a survivor of multiple crimes. What is she supposed to do? Like, if she doesn't want to be in the public eye, it's fine for her to want to settle down. Like, the whole shtick in her book was being able to move on from trauma. But then Gail asks if she's worried about passing on that trauma to her kids, which kind of the opposite. She avoided it so hard that Tatum is seeking out danger because she feels ill-prepared and wants to be more like her mom. You're like, it's not like she went out looking for that stuff. It just found her. Group splitting off always means death though, so I'm guessing Ghostface is not far around the corner, and as Tatum's getting into Ben's car, she sees his laptop screen because he didn't fully shut it for some reason, and it has a program running a deep fake of him as Stu, and he says that he was just trying to see how easy it would actually be to do, but he literally only got access to that footage of Stu while they were in the restaurant, and he already had a green screen of himself threatening Sidney ready to go. So I was like, shit, maybe Ben is in on it. She knocks him out with a laptop, which is when a ghost face walks around the corner. Could be more than one though. We have had 3 killers in the past. Cause yeah, even if you want to give the benefit of the doubt of like, oh no, she had sent him the footage and stuff beforehand and he was just going over it again at the bar. He was like, no, it'd be really hard for this to be fake. That's hard to do. Meanwhile, he makes this perfect version of it. Why wouldn't that have been shown to anyone in that? It's just stupid. But if it wasn't a writing oversight, it means that he's a killer that is dumb enough to have that open on his laptop and then didn't even shut the lid. At this point though, Video Stu has already called Sidney to let her know that Tatum's at this restaurant and that's exactly where he is too. So instead of waiting for Gail or going back inside to get her keys when she realizes she doesn't have them, she just starts running to the restaurant. Yeah, I guess they really didn't have some of these people around for all the filming days. I do still think there's more than one killer though, because when Tatum starts running, she has one catch up to her pretty fast while there's an entire massacre going on inside the tavern. Killer goes after Chloe. Chad gets stabbed again trying to help. As I mentioned, much like Courtney, I feel like they had a very limited filming window, so once Chloe runs out of the kitchen, the twins will not reappear in this location, leaving both Chloe and Lucas to be killed. Lucas in a particularly brutal way, and it was kind of goofy where they like stick the base of his skull onto a pointed tap handle, and he just starts like, puking up green slime liquid before it becomes blood. There's not a lick of tension in that scene though, so I guess they're making up for it with a little bit of brutality. I really hoped Lucas was gonna make it out, so that kind of sucked, and on to Tatum, who at one point just stops in the street and starts screaming like, girl, if you're gonna be a siren to your location, keep on the move, call the cops. Ben catches up with her at one point, and I'm like, okay, well, it could still be him if he took off the mask, but then he gets stabbed to shit, and not in a fake way like Billy gets stabbed to shit. He's gutted pretty good. No time to care, not that I did. It's time for a mother to empower daughter. Tatum runs into the coffee shop and barricades herself in the office because the killer knows the code to the door. Doing a great job concealing that stuff, Sidney. And over the phone, Sidney's instructing her on how to use the gun, gets her to put in her earbuds so she can use both her hands. And I just really liked that when she put the second AirPod in, she was just like, oh, I can't hear him anymore. And I realized it's because he did actually stop hitting the door. But in that moment, I was like, okay, babes, turn on awareness mode. Turn on awareness mode. But the scene just gets worse. Like, she is fine where she is. The killer can't get in. And even if it started like bashing its way through, then that's when you could start shooting. But Sid is like, no, shoot the killer through the wall, you know? Remove some of the structural integrity of your protection. But that's cool. It was a nice little flip on them almost being stabbed through the wall. And, you know, it's a nice, FU moment, even though you know that like this Ghostface isn't dead, or if this one's dead, there's definitely another one. But instead of just staying in that office until an officer can get there or someone else to help, because Sid doesn't call any cops when she can't get a hold of Mark for some reason, so there is no help coming right now. Tatum leaves the office, but then still won't just do the headshot to finish things off. Like, at that point, there was no reason for you to leave the office. So this one obviously isn't dead, and then the one that was clearly doing the tavern massacre shows up to kidnap her. You just had to stay in the office and call 911. Into the finale, though. Sid gets back to the house and they do one last little AI taunting moment where it's just like every wall in the house now has like a screen on it where it's like different AI versions of dead people taunting her. You got Mrs. Loomis, her brother, Dewey. They even start playing Dewey's theme, which just doesn't mesh well with the vibe of this scene that's currently happening. And I also just don't think it should be used for a deepfake version of the character. That's not actually Dewey. He doesn't get the theme. I get that it's supposed to be like, see, you as the audience doesn't want to let go of the past, but no one asked for all this. There's just a dedicated group of people who want to believe that Stu is still alive. But it leads her outside where they have Tatum tied to a chair, so let's reveal the killer. So first up, obviously, psych ward guy. He was wearing a bulletproof vest, and that's why he couldn't get shot. And I really hope that that wasn't supposed to be some big reveal unless you really thought Stu was alive. Like, the second you have to, acknowledge that Stu's not really there, it has to be him. The movie even stops to make fun of the people that think that Stu's still around, and they just kind of say that he apparently used to be a Google security specialist, and that's why he's good with AI. No explanation for why he's now working at what would be a significantly lower paying job at a psych ward. It's just a lazy way to explain why he was so good with AI, which is like, of all the things they don't explain in this movie and just kind of let be there, why did it need, who cares? You could literally just be some nerd on the internet that gets super into this stuff and figure out how to do it on your own. But to kind of counter that, I have now read an interview where they apparently do have an alternate ending shot where Stu is alive. So I feel vindicated in my lack of faith in anyone involved in this. And apparently that was what Guy Busick was contributing to the script. So that means it might have been part of the original script too. And they went on and filmed it, but I guess the test audiences didn't vibe with it. And yeah, that fully ends up explaining the lack of AI engagement with this. Like, half the writing team wanted to steer into it being real. So why do anything fun with modern technology? So there's no real motivation from him other than it might tie in a little bit to the mastermind of the whole plan, because he does say that he's read Sidney's book, but that mastermind is neighbor Jessica, which really wasn't surprising to a lot of people. You bring in this fairly well-known actress, there's a really good chance that, she's gonna be involved some way. But they drag Mark out, who somehow isn't dead from blood loss. Congratulations, you're this installment's Chad. But Jessica's motivation is kind of stupid. It feels like they're really trying to make this work both in the confines of the movie itself and on a more meta level, and it feels very lazy. Like Mindy theorized, she is just a huge Sidney fan. Read her book, said it changed her life because it inspired her to kill her abusive husband. Because Sidney always kills the bad guy. And she's just as wackadoodle as all the other reveals we've had in the past. She's literally the one who killed her own son and isn't even bothered by it because she's like, oh, he was just turning out like his dad. And I just feel like the brutality of that kill would have been to take any scrutiny off Jessica for the people thinking like, oh, well, Anna Camp's probably involved. Now you can just be like, oh, maybe, I guess not. But then Sidney disappeared. She didn't show up for the New York killings, and you can't have a Ghostface killing without Sidney Prescott, and Jessica just snaps? Even though the main point of that book is that there is life after trauma, but Jessica says that that's not for Sidney. She's got to keep being the final girl for the rest of her life. And when I say she snaps, it apparently was bad enough that she checked herself into a psych ward, which is how she met this guy, and then the other guy, Carl, who Gail killed. I guess he was just in it for love of the game. So I guess the current plan is to kill Sidney to both get rid of her own baggage over the situation and start a new generation by traumatizing Tatum so she can be the Scream Queen. So the meta's really been creeping in on all this. It's almost engaging with the franchise's own choice not to bring Sidney back in part 6, but then they're almost making us the Jessica character because of all the people that were really upset that they didn't bring her back. But then that was, you guys wanted her, but then you didn't want to pay her what she was worth. Almost making a commentary that it's the audience fault that people don't want the next generation, but then this movie is trying to engage with the next generation at the same time. But then they're also dressing it up as Sidney being past her prime. That's something like they specifically say, you're past your prime, that no one needs her anymore except for the studio, and they fire the existing lead actress. It doesn't feel like a return to form if it came as a form of desperation, guys. There is no doubt that most Scream fans want to see Sidney. Even the people that were a fan of the way those other movies were going in that direction, a lot of them do still love to see Sidney. I love seeing Sidney, but I feel like they examined so many of those ideas in Scream 4 and then even parts of Scream 5. This franchise is literally just starting to collapse under the weight of itself, and maybe this one was trying to reckon with that, but it just feels cheap, especially with all the stuff going on around the creation of this movie. You're trying to set up Sidney as past her prime with audiences, and that's never gonna work. Like, yes, of course, some people were very very excited to see what they would have done to a third installment with Sam and Tara, though I do think that if they kept going, Sam was going to become a killer, which I thought it looked like pretty obviously they were trying to set that up even when they have her like shun away from it. But who knows what they would have done? And it's unfortunate that I just don't feel like they've done anything more creative with that. Like, you were the ones who created the environment for Neve not to have a cameo appearance. So are you calling out yourselves now? I don't know, it just comes across as some real like, we're just trying to figure out who did this energy. It just doesn't work to have Jessica both represent the angry fan because Sidney wasn't in the last movie and the one who thinks she's past her prime. It just feels like such a weird way to engage with it. It's like kind of weird to call yourself out for trying to make a new final girl that didn't land when a lot of people really did enjoy the direction and the person that you fired. Unless making fun of yourself is the point, but I sincerely doubt that. Back to the movie though, the family team up to get Tatum out of the chairs. Sid shoots Google Boy Blunder in the head. Useless fucking character. Sorry, Ethan Embry. She and Tatum scuffle with Jessica a bit before they come out blazing like Sid and Gale in Scream 2, letting Tatum deal the headshot. And I get that her doing it is like a resolution of that side of the plot, but once she was incapacitated, you think Sid wouldn't want her child to have to shoot someone in the head? Oh well, it's over just in time for Mindy, Chad, and Gale to roll up alive and fine, just a little bit maimed. Twins taking care of the news reporting while Gale and Sid have a nice little heart-to-heart where Sidney says that she should have been there for her in New York because Tatum wasn't the last person she trusted. Gale's always been there for her too. So sweet, how far they've come. Ending with Sidney explaining to Tatum why she named her that, not because she sees her as a victim, but because the original Tatum was so strong. I don't care, the end. There is so much this movie could have done, so many interesting things they introduced and just abandoned because it is so clear that they have no idea what they want to do. They're trying to make a viable piece of IP, they're trying to do damage control, they're trying to please this set of fans, they want to engage with modern topics that are relevant, they want to engage with their own legacy as a franchise, but you can really tell that the people that have been involved in this movie since part 5 are fans of the franchise. Like, Guy Busick is a fan of this franchise, and the directors of those other installments were fans, but I think it's stifling them in a way that they can't get out from under. So for me, just like the last 2 movies, there are nuggets of interesting things here that they just waste. I think the foundation of the killer reveal is flawed. I think they fail at pointing the mirror back on themselves. I think Williamson has said that the mother-daughter dynamic is supposed to be the main focus, and I think that's handled pretty horribly because of fundamental flaws in how they wrote it. But maybe you disagree with me, let me know down below. But that's gonna do it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching, and thanks as always to my Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members, and to ZocDoc for sponsoring the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. All my other social medias are listed down below. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.